Good afternoon, and welcome to another Research in Action, brought to you by the Division of Research at Florida Atlantic University. My name is Karen Scapinato. I will be today's moderator. It is my great pleasure to introduce today's speaker, Dr. Cassandra Atkin-Plunk, who is an associate professor and associate director in FAU's School of Criminology and Criminal Justice here at Florida Atlantic University. And her research interests span both institutional and community corrections, with an emphasis on contemporary issues in corrections, including the reentry and reintegration of offenders and problem-solving courts. And with that, I'm just going to turn it over to Dr. Atkin-Plunk, who can tell us about her research interests.
Thank you very much, Karen, and good afternoon. It is an honor to be here today. Thank you, everyone, for taking time out of your afternoon to come and learn about some of the research that I've been working on for the past few years. So as Karen said, I am Dr. Cassandra Atkin-Plunk, and I'm an associate professor in the School of Criminology and Criminal Justice here at FAU. And my research is very community oriented. And I work closely with Palm Beach County to evaluate programs that have been implemented in the county to help people who have returned to the community from incarceration. And with these evaluations, I assess whether the programs are effective at achieving their goals. And I'll talk more about some specifics of one of these projects in just a little bit. But first, the title of my presentation is, Can Communities Help Stop Reoffending? And spoiler alert, the answer is yes. All right, but please don't go anywhere just yet. There are some caveats. And there are many things that our communities can still do to help people successfully reintegrate into the community, which is what I'm going to talk about. So I've structured this talk to start by providing some facts to hopefully get you interested in the topic. Although if you're here, hopefully you are already interested in the topic, but regardless, I'm going to provide some interesting facts related to reentry, which I really hope will make you realize why you and we and the entire community should care about this topic and why we should want to see change. Then I'm going to briefly mention individual, community, and societal level barriers that people face when reintegrating back into the community. We could be here for days if I tried to cover every issue that people experience while reintegrating. So while everything is interwoven, the focus of this talk is going to be specifically on the role of employment in reentry. Then I'm going to highlight some initiatives that are taking place in Palm Beach County related to employment for people who are returning to the community from incarceration and some intermediate results from this initiative. And then I'm going to end with some takeaways for everyone by talking about a couple of federal programs that exist for employers who are interested in hiring people who have been impacted by the criminal legal system, so that we as a community can help returning residents be successful during their reintegration. So, some interesting facts. At year-end 2019, which is the most recent national statistics available, there were over 1.43 million adults incarcerated in state and federal prison facilities across the United States. Okay, this does not include juveniles, which is an additional 44,000 youth incarcerated. It also does not include people who are incarcerated in local jails or people who are on probation and parole. So if we include adults who are in local jails or on probation and parole, this number skyrockets to over 6.34 million adults who are under some form of correctional supervision at year-end 2019. So this means that 1 in 40, or 2.5% of the adult population was under some form of correctional supervision at year-end 2019. And this does not include people who were previously under correctional supervision but no longer are. So chances are you know someone who currently is or previously was under some form of correctional supervision. Now, in Florida alone, we have approximately 80,000 people who are incarcerated in the Florida Department of Corrections. The Palm Beach County Jail has an average daily population of over 1,700 people incarcerated. Of the people who are incarcerated in the Florida Department of Corrections, approximately 4,000 of them were sentenced here in Palm Beach County. All right, so Karen mentioned the poll. So here is the first poll that I'm going to ask you, and it's less a poll, more of a question just to get you thinking about the topic. I'm a person that likes audience participation when I give presentations, and I wasn't going to let Zoom stop me here. So my partners at the Division of Research, they have shared a poll, and I would like you to answer, what % of people who are incarcerated in prison do you think will at some point in time be released from prison? The answer is, this is what matters, 95% of people who are incarcerated in prison will at some point in time be released from prison. So this means that 1.43 million people who are currently incarcerated in prison, of that, 1.35 million are going to eventually be released and returned to the community. In 2019, over 600,000 adults were released from state and federal correctional facilities. Okay, this does not include local jails. It also does not include youth who are incarcerated. So this means that approximately 10,000 adults are released each week from state and federal correctional facilities. In Palm Beach County, we see approximately 1,500 people return to Palm Beach County each year from incarceration in Florida Department of Corrections or after being sentenced and released from the county jail. Now, longitudinal studies from the Bureau of Justice Statistics consistently find that between 62 and 68% of people who are released from prison will be rearrested within 3 years of release. And these same studies show that over 80% will be rearrested within 10 years of release, and that approximately 60% will return to prison within 10 years of release. And that's not good, right? That's not what we want to see, what we hope to see. But one thing that these studies also show is that in the early years of release, that is some of the most opportune time for intervention. Okay, 43% of people who are arrested after release are arrested during that first year following release, which means that this is a time period when we have the ability to make a huge impact. Now, these high recidivism rates are due to numerous challenges and collateral consequences that people face when returning to the community from incarceration, including unemployment, which I will talk about in more detail on the next couple of slides. Another barrier is lack of stable housing. So, and not just lack of stable housing, but lack of stable and affordable housing. Right? Private housing is expensive, and you know that, especially if you live down here in Palm Beach County. And also, many landlords will deny rental applications if a person has a conviction on their record. So unless someone can move in with their family, which can also have its own set of challenges, it's possible that they will end up experiencing homelessness. And if you didn't have a chance to see Dr. Danielle Groten's Research and Action talk a month or two ago on women experiencing homelessness, I highly suggest that you go and watch that. It was incredibly powerful. Many people who return to the community also have existing substance use and mental health issues that typically remain unaddressed while they're incarcerated. So just to show how prevalent this issue is, 79% of people who returned to Palm Beach County in the last 2 years from Florida Department of Corrections had substance use treatment needs. They also have poor physical health. Okay, infectious diseases are much more common in prison than in the general population. And people who are incarcerated experience health issues similar to those in the community who are 10 years older than them. So someone in prison who's 40 years old would be of comparable physical health to someone in the community, but that person being 50 years old. Returning residents also have much lower levels of education than the general population. So example, in the average literacy rate for people who return to Palm Beach County in the last 2 years from Florida Department of Corrections was a 5th grade reading level. And none of this includes other societal and hidden barriers that returning residents experience, okay, including financial instability, stigma, loneliness, social exclusion, disenfranchisement, the fact that many return to disadvantaged neighborhoods with little support and little access to service. And I mean, the list really goes on and on. Despite this, there is a large body of research that shows that recidivism can be reduced. Okay, recidivism being returned to crime, rearrest, reconviction, reincarceration. And recidivism can be reduced, particularly if principles of effective intervention are used, if programs focus on cognitive behavioral change, and if programs are skill-oriented. So before we start talking about employment and reentry, it's important to note that the relationship between crime and employment is complex. Okay, just like everything dealing with crime is complex. But people who experience social deprivation and live in economically disadvantaged neighborhoods are less likely to be employed in legitimate employment that pays a living wage, which in turn then increases their likelihood of engaging in criminal behavior in the first place. And once someone becomes entangled in the criminal legal system, it makes it even more difficult for them to then gain legitimate employment. But a large body of research has shown that people who are able to obtain legitimate employment after being released from incarceration are significantly less likely to recidivate. And they're even less likely to recidivate if they obtain higher quality jobs and higher wage paying jobs. So employment is important. Okay, not only does it provide the means for basic survival, but it also helps rebuild self-esteem. It helps provide attachment to a conventional lifestyle. It's a source of informal social control. It helps a person structure their daily activities and also provides a sense of belonging in the community. So we know that employment is incredibly important to a person's ability to successfully reintegrate into the community, but there are numerous barriers that people face when they are trying to find and keep a job. Okay. Not only do people who have been incarcerated have weakened and fewer social contacts that could potentially help them find legitimate employment, but they also don't have recent job experience, which employers look for when hiring people. So having a gap in your resume, particularly a gap due to incarceration, can be detrimental in obtaining a job. They also have few job-related skills, including both hard skills and soft skills, which can result in a mismatch between what they have to offer and what the employers are looking for. And research finds that people with a conviction on their record, that they tend to work in low-skilled and low-paid jobs. Transportation difficulties are also a barrier to obtaining and maintaining legitimate employment. So people that don't have a car, they have to have an employer that's willing to work with them to schedule them around the bus schedule, or they have to rely on friends and families to ride to and from work. And then obviously there is also a lot of stigma surrounding a criminal record, which reduces employers' willingness to hire people who have been impacted by the justice system. So employers, they're concerned about workplace violence and employee theft. And there's quite a bit of research that shows that employers are significantly less likely to hire someone who has a criminal record. And they aren't just less likely to hire someone with a criminal record, but they're also less likely to call them in for an interview. And then finally, not that this is an exhaustive list by any means, but many states, including Florida, they have laws that prohibit people with a conviction on the record from obtaining occupational licenses that are needed for certain professions. And laws also ban them from working in certain sectors, okay, even if the crime that was committed is totally unrelated to that profession. Now, it's pretty impossible to create a complete and accurate list of all restrictions because they don't just exist in laws, okay? They also exist in rules, they exist in formal and informal policies, and restrictions vary widely. They vary from lifetime restrictions to time-limited restrictions to place-based restrictions. But in 2007, okay, which we know is an old study at this point, but there was a study conducted or funded by the Annie E. Casey Foundation, and it was conducted for the Florida governor's ex-offender task force at the time. And that study found that at the time, at least 40% of jobs in Florida appeared to be subjected to state-mandated criminal background checks or restrictions based on criminal history. So again, old study, outdated at this point, but it still shows that people are restricted from working in numerous jobs. All right, I have another poll. We're going to see how this one works out, if I can see the results. And if not, again, no problem. So here's another poll for you. before we get into what Palm Beach County is doing to address barriers to employment for people who are returning to the community. What percent of people who are released from prison report earning zero income in their first year following release from prison? Oh, yay, I could see it. All right. So 46% of you said that 75% of people released report earning no income in the year following release. Incorrect, but again, good try. The answer is actually 45%, okay? So a 2018 study found that 45% of people who are released from prison reported earning no income in the first full calendar year following release. And of those that did report earnings, their median annual income was just a little bit over $10,000. And only 20% of those who did report income reported earning more than $15,000 in their first year following release. So a slight majority actually report earning income, but of those that do, it's median income $10,000 and very few are earning more than $15,000 in the first year following release. So given that 95% of people are going to be released and return to the community, we need to work to reduce barriers to reentry in general, but also to employment more specifically. So the lock them up and throw away the key mentality that we've had for a long time is not in society's best interest. So Palm Beach County has been a leader in the national effort to reduce recidivism of people who are returning from incarceration. Now, formal reentry efforts in Palm Beach County began 20 years ago, so back in 2001. And since then, programming has expanded and evolved to meet the needs of returning residents. In 2008, Palm Beach County established a reentry task force, which previously operated under the county's Criminal Justice Commission, but now operates under the Palm Beach County Public Safety Department. And in 2011, Palm Beach County applied for and received their very first Second Chance Act grant to help support adult reentry services in the county. And with this grant, they established the Regional and State Transitional Offender Reentry Initiative, or the RESTORE Initiative, which still exists today. And so RESTORE is a comprehensive model for reentry, which is designed to reduce recidivism for people who have returned to Palm Beach County from incarceration. And it works by using risk needs assessments to identify the needs of individuals when they're returning, providing them with targeted evidence-based programs, and then coordinating pre-release and post-release services to help people transition from incarceration into the community. And this is a collaborative model, okay, across the county. Florida Department of Corrections is involved, the Palm Beach County Sheriff's Office, 3 community-based reentry service providers, including Gulfstream Goodwill Industries, the Lord's Place, and the Reentry Center of Riviera Beach, along with numerous other stakeholders that have an interest in reducing recidivism. So the RESTORE initiative operates primarily out of Sago Palm Reentry Center, which is one of 5 designated reentry centers operated by the Florida Department of Corrections. So Sago Palm is a medium security prison that can house up to 384 adult men, right? So people who are incarcerated in Florida Department of Corrections, when they are within 3 years of release, assuming that they meet classification criteria and that there is bed space available at Sago Palm, they can be transferred to Sago Palm to help get them back closer to the community, which they will ultimately be returning to. Now, while the RESTORE initiative operates primarily out of Sago Palm, people who are incarcerated at any facility in the state of Florida who are released back to Palm Beach County can receive help through the RESTORE initiative with their reentry efforts. So in 2017, Palm Beach County Public Safety Department, they applied for and were awarded a grant from the Department of Justice to enhance their employment services for people who are returning to the county from Florida Department of Corrections or from Palm Beach County Sheriff's Office after being sentenced and released. And with this funding, they implemented transitional employment programs in tandem with cognitive behavioral interventions. And then Palm Beach County contracted with me through FAU to conduct a process and outcome evaluation of the program. And so I'll be presenting some intermediate results from the outcome evaluation today. But first, to give you an idea of what transitional employment programs are. So transitional employment programs, they rapidly place participants into temporary paid jobs, usually with a nonprofit or government agency, while also providing support to the participant through case management services, job coaching workshops, resume assistance, etc. And they ultimately seek to help participants find permanent employment after they have completed the program. So a few slides ago, I talked about the barriers to employment that returning residents experience, including those weakened social contacts, the lack of recent job experience, and few job-related skills. So transitional employment seeks to overcome these barriers by providing people with recent job experience, by helping people learn skills, and by strengthening their contacts in the community to help them obtain permanent employment. The other part of the Palm Beach County Transitional Employment Program is to provide participants with cognitive behavioral intervention. And cognitive behavioral intervention is a psychosocial intervention which is designed to help people change cognitive distortions and behaviors, to help them improve emotional regulation, and then also to help develop coping skills and strategies. So basically what these programs do is help people learn to understand their thoughts and their emotions and teach them how to implement strategies to change how they react to certain situations that might otherwise result in antisocial behavior. With the Palm Beach County Transitional Employment Program, there are two overarching goals. One being to reduce recidivism, and then two, to increase long-term independent employment. So as I said, Palm Beach County, they received the Department of Justice grant in October of 2017, and it took a little over a year of planning to get the transitional employment programs up and running, but they officially began in late November of 2018. And then each one of the community-based reentry partners, they developed their own transitional employment program. So Gulfstream Goodwill Industries, they developed a 12-week, 20-hour per week warehouse or retail transitional employment program, where participants would work in the warehouse, sorting through donated goods to get them ready to ship out to retail stores, or they would actually work in a retail store. So they would work 16 hours per week in their job and then attend 4 hours of cognitive behavioral therapy or cognitive behavioral intervention a week. The Lord's Place, they developed an 8-week, 16-hour per week culinary transitional employment program, where participants would assist the kitchen manager with processing and organizing shipment of dry goods, cleaning and organizing the kitchen, pressure washing, or any other task that was necessary to keep the kitchen clean and orderly. And they would work for 12 hours per week in their job and then attend 4 hours of cognitive behavioral intervention. And then finally, the Reentry Center of Riviera Beach, they developed a 10-week, 28-hour per week construction transitional employment program, where participants worked on a construction site to refurbish dilapidated homes. So they learned masonry skills, carpentry, electrical, plumbing, and HVAC skills from professional tradesmen in the field. And the participants would work 24 hours per week in their job and attend 4 hours of CBI per week. So the programs were operational for about 15 months prior to COVID beginning. And COVID definitely did have an impact on the operations of the transitional employment programs for a short period of time, but then they did continue to operate post-COVID, again, taking into account all of the safety measures. Okay, so who was eligible to participate in the transitional employment program? The first eligibility criteria was that the returning resident had to be living in Palm Beach County. Okay, and they had to have been incarcerated in the Florida Department of Corrections or have been sentenced to or convicted of and sentenced to time in the Palm Beach County Jail. They also had to volunteer to receive reentry services through the larger Restore initiative. Okay, nobody was forced to participate in this. They also had to be an adult. Okay, so Palm Beach County does provide reentry services to youth, but for this program specifically, the person had to be 18 years or older. And they also had to score low, moderate to high risk on the level of service inventory revised, which is a validated risk needs assessment instrument that helps correctional officials and treatment providers make levels of supervision and treatment need decisions. People who scored as low risk to recidivate on the LSIR were not eligible for the Transitional Employment Program. The person also had to score as less job ready on an employment readiness checklist. And this is a 51-item checklist that was created by Palm Beach County with assistance from the Council of State Government to assess a person's readiness for employment. And then finally, part of this study was to conduct a randomized control trial, or an RCT. So an RCT is a type of experiment where people who are eligible for the program were chosen at random by me through a random number generator to either participate in the program, so the treatment group, or to receive reentry services as usual, or the control group. So those who were randomized into the control group, they were still eligible to receive reentry services. They just couldn't receive the enhanced transitional employment program. So an RCT basically helps us to isolate the effects of the transitional employment program on recidivism and employment. So if there's differences in recidivism and employment outcomes, we can then be more confident that they are due to the treatment or to the transitional employment program that a person participated in, as opposed to some external factor. And the program was set up where there was funding to provide transitional employment programming to 120 people with the goal of having another 120 in the control group. So the results that I'm going to show you today are 2 years post-implementation. Okay, this is a 3-year program, but I just received the final data, and so I'm in the process of cleaning that data and we'll soon be analyzing it for the final outcome evaluation. So I'm just not in a place to show you that data yet, and I promise you don't want to look at the boring Excel sheets. So during the first 2 years of implementation, 463 people volunteered to receive reentry services through the larger Restore initiative. And of those, 161, or 34%, were referred to me for randomization into the transitional job program. And there's a number of reasons why everybody wasn't referred to randomization. Okay, so they might not have met the criteria, the eligibility criteria that I just showed you. They also might not have been interested in participating. So of the 161 who were referred to me, 84, or 52%, were randomized into the treatment group to receive the transitional employment program, while 77, or 48%, were randomized into the control group to just receive the regular reentry services. So of the 84 people who were randomized into the treatment group to receive the transitional employment services during those first 2 years of implementation, 95% were male, which reflects the population that is incarcerated. 76% were Black, which reflects the overrepresentation of people of color in the criminal justice system, while 21% were white. 94% were non-Hispanic. They were an average of 39 years old, ranging between 19 and 64 years old. They also had an average of 11 prior arrests. So they had significant experience with the criminal legal system prior, with an average of 7 prior convictions as adults. 92% had also previously been incarcerated, whether in prison or in county jail. Now, there was no significant differences between the treatment group that I'm presenting here and the control group on any of the demographic characteristics, the criminal history characteristics, risk level, or employment readiness. On average, the treatment group, the transitional employment group, they received approximately 140 hours of transitional employment programming during those first 2 years, and an average of 11 cognitive behavioral intervention hours. And this was significantly more than the control group, which is good and what we should be seeing. Okay, the control group received an average of 0 transitional employment hours and an average of less than 1 hour of cognitive behavioral intervention. However, and what's important to note is that about a third of the treatment group, so those who were randomized to receive the services, actually ended up receiving no transitional employment hours or CDI hours. And this can also be due to a number of reasons. Okay, so they could have initially volunteered for services, and then after being randomized into the treatment group and being offered the services, then they might have decided later on that they actually didn't want to participate. They could have moved, they could have also got rearrested early on. So as I said earlier, the goals of the Transitional Employment Program are to reduce recidivism and to increase employment. So with regard to recidivism, there are multiple ways that you can measure recidivism, which I alluded to before. Okay, so it can be measured through rearrest, reconviction, or reincarceration. So we looked at all 3 measures of recidivism, including being rearrested in Palm Beach County, being convicted in Palm Beach County, and being reincarcerated in either the Florida Department of Corrections or being convicted and reincarcerated in the county jail. For the treatment group, during the first 2 years of program implementation, 24% were rearrested, 13% were reconvicted, and 5% were reincarcerated. Now, when we compare this to the control group, or those that did not receive that extra transitional employment programming, 34% were rearrested, 17% were reconvicted, and 10% were reincarcerated. So a couple of things to note about this. While we do see lower recidivism rates for the treatment group, these are not statistically significantly different from each other. All right, so just want to throw that out there. This also, though, does include the entire sample. So this includes people who were enrolled very early on in the implementation and who we might have 23 months of follow-up data on, but it also includes people who were enrolled in month 23 and we only have 1 month of follow-up data on. So for some people, we have a lot of follow-up time, and for others, we had a lot less follow-up time. But to account for that, for those that I had at least 6 months of follow-up data on, 16% of the treatment group and 17% of the control group were rearrested during the first 6 months of release. For those that I had 12 months of follow-up data on, 29% of the treatment group was rearrested, while 38% of the control group was rearrested during that first 12 months of release. And then for those that I had at least 18 months of follow-up data on, 38% of the treatment group was rearrested, while 45% of the control group was rearrested during those first 18 months after release. Now, again, these are also not statistically significantly different from each other, but we are seeing lower rearrest rates than nationally, okay, where I mentioned earlier that 43% of people who are arrested after release are arrested during that first year following release. So we're seeing 29% in our treatment group and 38% in our control group. So we are seeing numbers in the direction that we would hope to. And again, I'm going to keep mentioning it's only 2-year results. So beyond recidivism, the other goal, as I said, of the Transitional Employment Program is to increase employment. There are a number of different employment outcomes that we are looking at, but for today, I'm just going to talk about 3 of the different outcomes. So somebody being employed, yes or no. Somebody being employed in multiple jobs, yes or no. And then for those who actually were employed, the number of days that it took them between release and becoming employed. So as you can see here, 2/3 of the treatment group were employed at some point during the follow-up period, while only 38% of the control group was employed. Now, for the treatment group, this does include being employed in the Transitional Employment Program. However, we can also see that 33% of the treatment group was employed in multiple jobs, while only 5% of the control group had been employed in multiple jobs. And then finally, as I said earlier, transitional employment seeks to connect people to employment quickly after their release from incarceration. And as you can see here, participants in the Transitional Employment Program who were employed started their job in an average of 35 days after being released, so just at a little over 1 month. While it took an average of 56 days or a little less than 2 months for those in the control group to become employed. And all of these differences between the treatment and control groups are significantly different. So a couple of takeaways, during the first 2 years of implementation of the Transitional Employment Program in Palm Beach County, we are seeing promising results. And while the differences in recidivism rates weren't statistically significant, they are in the direction that we would hope to see. And we are seeing positive findings with regard to employment. And again, it's only 2-year results. As I said earlier, I'm in the process of cleaning up that final data for this project, which I hope to have analyzed by the end of this year. So at the end of the day, I am a firm believer that everyone deserves a second chance, or a third or a fourth chance. So I have a couple of action items that I want to leave you all with. So as you learned earlier, 95% of people who are incarcerated in prison will at some point in time be released and returned to the community. And as my friend David Garlock, who has previously been incarcerated, very recently said, society tells us to come out of prison and to do X, Y, and Z to be successful. But then society also says you can't do X, Y, and Z because you went to prison. And if we want safer communities and we want less crime and less victimization, we can't set people up for failure. And that's what we do when we refuse to hire people who we think are different than us. Okay, but if we self-reflect and we do it honestly, I would venture to say that every single person who is listening to this has committed a crime at some point in their life. And most likely you have committed a crime that could have resulted in jail or prison time. And probably quite a lot of jail or prison time if the judge wanted to sentence you to the maximum penalty associated with that crime to make an example out of you. Okay, but what makes those who haven't spent time in jail and prison different than those who have? Well, we didn't get caught, okay? Or in some cases, if we did get caught, we had the resources or were in a position of privilege that made sure that we didn't go to jail or prison. Okay, so self-reflect. And then research suggests that if we get to know people who have been incarcerated, that it reduces stigmatizing attitudes that we might originally hold towards them. So, which could be because we then recognize, that they aren't other people, that they're just people, and people make mistakes, we make bad choices, and we shouldn't be defined by the worst 4 minutes of our lives, and that there is humanity in everyone. And then finally, research shows that people who have previously hired someone with a criminal record are more likely to do so again in the future. Not only because it has normalized somebody who has been involved in the criminal legal system, but because having a crime on your record doesn't make somebody any less likely to work hard. So if you're in a position to hire, maybe consider hiring someone who has been impacted by the legal system. The federal government, they offer a work opportunity tax credit that is available to employers who hire people from groups that have consistently faced barriers to employment, including people being released from prison. There is also a federal bonding program which is sponsored by the Department of Labor, that issues fidelity bonds to businesses who offer jobs to workers in what they consider at-risk categories or at-risk groups. And this includes people with a record of arrest, conviction, or imprisonment. And these bonds are business insurance policies that protect the employer in the event of loss of money or property due to employee dishonesty. So I know I threw a lot of information at you very quickly, and I really only scratched the surface of reentry, but there is a lot that can be done to improve outcomes for people who are impacted by the legal system. And if we as a society and community can help people live productive lives after being released, everyone benefits. Okay, so before I open it up to questions, I want to leave you with a before and after picture of the house that participants in the Transitional Employment Program at the Reentry Center of Riviera Beach helped fix up and rehabilitate. So as you can see from the before picture, this was clearly a rundown house, and the participants worked for months to fix it up, both inside and outside. And then it was sold to a first-time home buyer at a reduced price. So besides just promising findings, there are tangible benefits from these transitional employment programs in Palm Beach County. And with that, I thank you very much for taking the time out of your day. And I think we will be opening up to questions.
Great, thank you very much, Cassandra. Very important topic, and I like what you said earlier, that everybody has humanity, right? Don't judge people because for whatever period of their time they made a mistake. You know, there's more to a person than just that one mistake. Just as a reminder, if you have a question, please use the Q&A button in the bottom of your screen and type it there. We have too many attendees to open it up for oral questions, auditory questions. So with that, I'm going to start going through our questions here. So you showed some statistics, Cassandra. The question here is, do these include men and women? And is there any gender difference that you can talk about?
So were this related to the Transitional Employment Program, I'm assuming?
Yeah, this was in the early on that the question came up, but yes, the Transitional Employment.
Yeah, so with regard to the Transitional Employment Program, yes, men, women, anybody of any sex and gender were able to participate. There were very few women that participated, however, just because of the nature of the of the correctional population and the people who were returning. So I think I said 95% of the individuals in the Transitional Employment Program were men. I have not looked at gender differences, and I'm going to just assume, because there are so few women who participated, that we're not going to have enough statistical power to look at that anyways. But I have not looked at that yet. But yes, there were. This was open to women as well.
How do the statistics look like for the two questions that you threw out? The one where how many are being re-released and how many are being reconvicted? Are there gender differences there?
I do not have that off the top of my head, so I don't want to speak to it, but I can very quickly, I know exactly where to look for that information, and so I'm happy to find the answer to that, and we can post that on the website afterwards.
Great. Okay, well, here's one question on how an individual can find a local group or organ helping release persons. Most of what this individual is finding are programs for substance abuse, but not specific to re-entry or released persons.
Yeah, so that's a great question. And if the person is in Palm Beach County, they are more than welcome to reach out to me, and I'm very happy to connect them with the reentry in Palm Beach County and the service providers, so that that individual can receive help. I wouldn't say that it is out there all over the internet of where you can go and get services. Palm Beach County does mail letters to everybody who is going to be released and come back to Palm Beach County to inform them of the services that are here. However, if the person was in a different state or a different jurisdiction, they might not have received that. But I'm happy to connect. You can also Google reentry in Palm Beach County, and through the Palm Beach County's government, the Department of Public Safety, they will have an email address and you can reach out to them also, and they can help connect with service providers.
And of course, at any given time, if you have additional questions for Dr. Atkin-Plunk or anybody else who's speaking in our series, please feel free to contact the speaker directly or contact us in our office. We'll direct you to the appropriate people. So you mentioned some of the factors that are obvious, sort of obvious when individuals are trying to re-entry, into a normal life after being incarcerated for a little while. And you mentioned
or a long while.
Yeah, or a long while. And you mentioned the lack of skills, the lack of previous employment that is typically important when you have to, apply for a position. How important is it to have a permanent housing? Often, as everybody knows, you have to give an address, you have to give a
Yep.
phone number, an email address, right? All that is not trivial, I'm sure, when you're coming out of prison. How important is that, and how is that being mitigated?
It's incredibly important. You have to have a home base, right? You have to have a place to go to brush your teeth, to shower, to dress, in addition to everything else that a home provides in the security. And as I mentioned earlier, shout out to Danielle Groten, who does work in this area. And so that is a huge barrier to a lot of people who are coming back to the community. And Palm Beach County, while reentry services, they will assist with finding housing for people who might not have a place to live. We know that in Palm Beach County, affordable housing options are very far and few between. And that's for the general public. Nevertheless, somebody who has very limited, if no resources after being released from prison or from the jail. And so sometimes that can result in a revolving cycle. You don't have a place to live. You can't get a job. You can't get a job because you don't have a place to live. It goes on and on. So housing is, it's a right, it's a need that everybody, that people coming out do have.
Yeah, very difficult. And as you mentioned, that it ends up in like this devil's circle, right? Where it goes around and around. One item influences the other and so on. Maybe related to that, do you have a number of how many of the individuals who have been incarcerated and are being released end up being homeless, or like truly living on the street, being homeless?
That's a great question. I wouldn't say that it's a majority. I want to say 15% maybe. Please don't quote me on that. I can find that, there's going to be varying statistics, but numerous people who are homeless have previously been impacted by the criminal justice system.
Mm-hmm. So you mentioned this very interesting reentry program in Palm Beach County. The question here is if such programs exist in other states and if you're aware of them.
I am aware of others that exist sporadically throughout the United States. I would say that in the past, 15, 20 years, there has been a resurgence in a focus on reentry and reintegration of people. I think we are starting to see less of the lock them up and throw away the key mentality that we did see a lot of in the 80s and 90s. But we are still seeing a lot of fallout from that. We still have over 1.43 million people incarcerated currently. And that's just in state and federal facilities. So there are other programs. I know that there is one in Broward County. I can't speak specifically to every jurisdiction that has one, but they're typically not run at the federal level. They're not run at the state level. There might be, the Florida Department of Corrections, they have different things to help with reentry, but they're not operating it at the local level. So it varies from jurisdiction to jurisdiction. Hillsborough County does reentry work. Jacksonville does reentry work. I mean, there are a number, but I don't know if there's any national statistics out there that indicate how many communities are working on this.
Sounds like at best they're at the county level, if not at the city level.
Yes.
Okay. All right. So you mentioned also for the reentry program, you mentioned the skills that are important when you're applying for a job, which most of us, I'm sure can relate to. Can you give an example of how the program addresses and what kind of skills the program teaches and what kind of continued education the program provides?
So in each transitional employment program, as I said, the providers develop their own, right? So the construction one, you can see the most tangible skills being developed with their learning electrical, learning plumbing, learning HVAC. But they also teach a lot of soft skills that may not have been taught before. And one of the great things about a transitional employment program is that it is not you mess up on the job and you're fired. It is, we are going to help walk you through this and teach you how to be a good employee. That if you are going to be late, you call. If you are going to miss work, you call. If you need to have something rescheduled, you call. That you have conversations with your supervisor instead of having getting mad at one of your coworkers. So it teaches a lot of those soft skills in addition to teaching some hard skills. I will say that, a number of individuals who started in the transitional employment program have gone on to be hired by the organization which employed them in the transitional employment program. So that's good to see. So they're learning hard and soft skills.
So these programs, they start before the individual is being released from prison, or do they start as they are already back in the community?
So it depends. If a person, so the transitional employment program itself starts in the community. Okay. The Restore Initiative and the larger reentry initiative in Palm Beach County in general starts in prison at Sago Palm Reentry Facility because it is local. Okay. There are 80 plus prisons in the state of Florida, and Palm Beach County does not have the person power to go to every prison and provide services while somebody is incarcerated. Now, there are opportunities for people to be involved in programming to a limited extent while they're incarcerated, but not nowhere near where it should be. So with Sago Palm, there are case managers who work with reentry in the community, go into the prison facility and do programming also while the person is incarcerated prior to them coming back to Palm Beach County. But that's just for Sago Palm because it is within our county.
We have a good number of more questions, and I know we're running out of time. So for those questions that we don't get to right now, we will ask Dr. Atkin-Plunk to answer those offline. We will post those answers on our website together with a recording of today's presentation. So anybody who would like to review or would like the answers to their question, we will answer them. We just won't have enough time during the live session today. So I'm going to finish us off with one last question. There is a question here from a student who is asking how he or she can get involved with this kind of research. And maybe we can extend that also to the community. Is there any opportunity for community members to participate in this kind of research?
Sure, give me a call. I need all the help I can get. Please feel free to email me, and I would love to talk with students about opportunities for assisting with research. Would love to.
So very easy, great. Okay, thank you very much, Cassandra. A very interesting, very important topic. Again, we will have Dr. Atkin-Plunk answer the remaining questions offline. We will post the answers on our website, so please look out for that. If you look at FAU Research in Action, you will find the answers though in just a few days. With that, thank you very much, Cassandra. We'd love to have you here again, so maybe we can follow up with you at a later date. Thank you, everybody, for calling in. Have a great rest of your day. Bye-bye.
Thank you so much, Karen.